All right, you're just going to cue me on Snapchat, right? Or whatever it is, Snapchat.
I can cue you on this.
Oh, okay. I'll turn this so you can see it, but I don't want to get distracted by trying to see how many people in the queue. Oh, no.
Mine are all.
You know what? I saw you take it out of your pocket, but I couldn't.
I think that this one's not. No, it's
Okay, Emily, you can begin.
Yep. Good evening, and welcome to tonight's telephone town hall with Lieutenant Governor Matt Dehn, Democratic candidate for Attorney General. My name is Emily, and we are excited to have you join us tonight. We will begin in a few minutes, but let me share how this process works. Right now, we're in the process of dialing out to thousands of people, so just stay on the line, and we'll be hearing from Lieutenant Governor Dehn shortly. Also, we want to hear from you. If you would like to ask a question of Matt, please just press 0 on your telephone keypad at any time, and you'll be connected directly with one of our volunteer operators. Again, press 0 to ask a question. If you have just joined us, good evening, and welcome to tonight's telephone town hall with Lieutenant Governor Matt Dehn, Democratic candidate for Attorney General. We're going to begin in just a moment, and thanks for joining us. Right now, we're in the process of dialing out to thousands of people, so please stay on the line and we will hear from Lieutenant Governor Dehn shortly. If you want to ask a question of Matt at any time, please press 0 during this event. Again, press 0 at any time to ask a question. And now, here's Lieutenant Governor Matt Dehn, candidate for Delaware Attorney General.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us tonight. I know that this is a very busy time of night for many of you. This is the first telephone town hall that I've ever done, and I'm really looking forward to it because it's going to give me a chance to hear from you about some of the issues that you're concerned about. But let me just mention the issue that's front and center for me. I'm running for Attorney General of our state for one primary reason. I want to help our state get its violent crime and homicide rate under control. I started my career as a lawyer over 20 years ago working in many of the neighborhoods that are now being plagued by violent crime. I know these neighborhoods. I know many of the families who live there. And these are good, hardworking people who live in these neighborhoods. And I'm really determined to help them bring some security and order back to their lives. They have a right to live in peace, and their kids have a right to grow up in an environment where they're not surrounded by chaos or violence. But beyond that, crime in any of our neighborhoods in Delaware affects the entire state. It makes companies reluctant to come to Delaware and employ our neighbors. It makes it harder for our kids here in Delaware to do well in school. So the bottom line is that whether we live in the city of Wilmington or in the suburbs, we all have a stake in fighting back against violent crime. That's what got me into this race for Attorney General, and that's going to be my focus if I'm elected. So again, I appreciate you joining us tonight, and I'm going to turn things back over to Emily.
Good evening. If you have just joined us, just a reminder that during the course of this call, at any point, you may press 0 on your telephone keypad to ask a question of Lieutenant Governor Matt Dehn. Again, at any time during this call, please press 0 to ask a question. The Lieutenant Governor is going to take your questions in just a moment, but first we want to ask you a question and see what you think about the issues facing the next Attorney General. You can respond by simply pressing a button on your keypad. Here is the question. What should be done to reduce violent crime in Delaware? Please respond by pressing the corresponding number to the 5 following answers. Again, the question is what should be done to reduce violent crime in Delaware? Visible law enforcement presence on the streets, press 1. Aggressive enforcement of current gun laws, press 2. Reduced pretrial release of violent offenders, press 3. Creating connections between the Attorney General's office and the communities, press 4. Bolstering grassroots organizations in high crime areas, press 5. Matt, what is your answer to the poll question?
Well, actually for me, it's all of the above. All those topics that you just mentioned are part of my plan that's posted on our website at www.mattdehn.com. And I really encourage everybody who's on the phone to read it so they know exactly what I plan to do if I'm elected. And hopefully we'll get into some details about this when people begin to ask us some questions.
Well, at this point, we are going to take our first question. But a reminder to everybody who is on the line, you may dial 0 at any time and talk to someone to present a question for the Lieutenant Governor. Our first call tonight is from Yvonne Price. Yvonne, you're on with the Lieutenant Governor.
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to know when we can get more cops on the streets and get the crime out.
That's a great question. And the reason I think it's a great question is that there are a lot of different steps that we need to take in order to reduce violent crime. But as you suggested in your question, one absolutely necessary step that we have to take is to have a more visible presence of law enforcement officers out of their cars, patrolling the neighborhoods where we've seen these high rates of crime in our state. And we know that this works, and it sounds like you know that it works also, because we've seen it work time after time in other states and other cities that have had violent crime problems that are similar to ours. And we've also done it here in Delaware before. Just a couple of years ago, state police officers were patrolling parts of Wilmington right alongside Wilmington police officers. And in the areas where those joint patrols were happening, crime went down, and the residents who lived in those areas were incredibly supportive. So as Attorney General, it would be my goal to have multiple law enforcement agencies working side by side in these areas where we have high crime rates right now, providing assistance, for example, to the Wilmington police in making these expanded patrols happen. And that's not going to be easy. There's going to be challenges that we have to overcome. There's logistical challenges that come up when you have multiple police agencies working side by side in the same area. There's financial challenges. We're going to have to pay overtime for some of those police officers who are working those extra shifts. But those are the types of challenges that I think I've been very good at overcoming in 6 years as Lieutenant Governor. And I'm very confident that working with our police agencies, working with our city and county and state government, that we'll be able to put together a plan to make this heightened police presence happen. The state and the county police have actually been working jointly with the Wilmington Police Department very recently on a very limited basis, and I hope that we can expand that going forward. So again, I think that's a great question, and that's really one of the primary parts of my plan for trying to get our violent crime rate down, is having that visible police presence out of their cars in the neighborhoods.
Thank you, Matt. A few moments ago, we asked our first poll question of the evening. The question was, what should be done to reduce violent crime in Delaware? And the response that got the highest response was aggressive enforcement of current gun laws. Lieutenant Governor, would you like to weigh in on that response?
Well, I think that's a very good response, and that also is one of the priorities that I've set out. But this is maybe going to sound like a politician. I think that all five of the answers are good answers, because reducing crime is a complex problem, and there really is no single solution. We have to do a lot of things right if we're going to best protect our residents. But with respect to that gun issue, one of the things that I'm proudest of in my time as Lieutenant Governor is the fact that I worked side by side with our state, county, and city police officers in getting a universal background check law passed in Delaware so that we could be sure that people who were purchasing guns didn't have criminal records that should forbid them from buying guns. And that's part of the reason that the state police and the Delaware FOP have endorsed me as their candidate for Attorney General. And going forward, I think that enforcement of that gun law, of the laws that prevent people from having guns that shouldn't have them, from selling guns who shouldn't be selling them, from purchasing guns who shouldn't be purchasing them, strict enforcement of all those laws is going to be a priority for me, because it is most of the murders that are happening in our state are happening with guns, and they're happening from people who should not be in possession of those guns. So we want people who are thinking about carrying a gun who shouldn't be, selling a gun who shouldn't be, buying a gun who shouldn't be, to know with certainty that they're going to do time if they're caught. That's one of the best ways that we can deter people from committing these gun crimes. And having that type of strict enforcement policy with respect to gun crimes is going to be one of my priorities. And again, having been someone who is a firm advocate of strict gun control laws is going to put me in a good position to also strictly enforce them.
Great. Matt, thank you. As a reminder to anybody that might have just joined us, at any point to ask the Lieutenant Governor a question, simply press 0 on your keypad. Our next question is going to be from Donald. Donald? Donald, do you have a question for the Lieutenant Governor? Good evening.
Yes, I do. Lieutenant Governor, I live in North Wilmington, right on the border of Claymont, and to be candid with you, drug use has been going up rapidly. I would like to know if what are your ideas on helping people who are addicts, and to help also get these deadly drugs off our streets, and if you think legalizing medical marijuana would help.
Those are great questions. You actually asked a couple of different questions, so let me try to answer them both. If you go to our website, one of the things that I'm proud of about our approach to crime is that we're not just looking at short-term solutions, but we're also looking at long-term solutions. And I think you hit the nail right on the head. a lot of our violent crime is being driven by drug traffic, and if we don't get the demand for drugs down, then we're never really going to fully address that problem. And beyond that, it's just the right thing to do. We have it's just a tragic situation in our state that we have so many of our neighbors who are suffering from substance abuse disorder. So one of the things that I'm very focused on as Attorney General is trying to put together a more focused effort in our state to make treatment available for people who are willing to get it, to make sure that we don't have long waiting periods, which we too often do now, for people who are interested in getting treatment, making sure that there are treatment options available that are close to their homes so they don't have to travel to other states, and that they can get into without waiting periods, because in many cases you really just have a limited window of time when people are willing to get treatment, and you have to be able to jump in and make sure that they get it when they're willing to get it and in a place where it's reasonable for them to get it. And only when we have done that are we really going to address that problem long term. That in some part is just an issue of getting the resources to do it. Those things cost money, and it's going to be a priority for me to have our legislature focused on dedicating money for that, have our insurance companies, who should be bearing part of the burden, contributing to the effort, and having our hospitals, who also should be contributing to dealing with this problem, bearing part of the financial burden. You mentioned legalization of marijuana. We have medical marijuana already legalized in Delaware. Beyond its use for medical purposes, I support making the personal possession of marijuana, small quantities of marijuana, I support making that a violation rather than a misdemeanor or a felony, which would essentially make it the same thing as a traffic ticket. I don't think that people should be swept up into the criminal justice system and get criminal records just because they have a small quantity for their own personal use. But at the same time, I don't want to completely legalize it because I do think that it is often a gateway drug into more serious drugs, particularly for young people. And I do want people to still, young people in particular, to believe that it's something that they ought to avoid.
Great. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Before we get to the next question for Matt, we will have another poll question for everybody on the line, this one in the area of preventing crime. Again, you'll be able to answer by simply pressing the corresponding number on your keypad. Here's the question. What should the Attorney General do to address the underlying causes of crime? Again, what should the Attorney General do to address the underlying causes of crime? Do a better job treating substance abuse issues? Press 1. Better prepare inmates who are going to be released? Press 2. Expand the availability of after-school and summer programming for youth? Press 3. Make improvements in our public schools? Press 4. Let me read those one more time for you. Do a better job treating substance abuse issues? Press 1. Better prepare inmates who are going to be released? Press 2. Expand the availability of after-school and summer programming for youth? Press 3. Make improvements in our public schools? Press 4. While we counted those results from everybody, Matt, what is your answer to the poll question?
Well, that was, I guess, another trick question because, again, I think that all those things are part of the solution. And, you know, the crime problem that we're having, it didn't happen overnight. And there are a lot of things that drive it, and we're not going to fix it overnight. But if we're going to fix it over the long run, then addressing all those things is part of the equation. We just talked about the substance abuse problem, the fact that we have inmates coming out of our prisons and 2/3 of them committing new crimes that are so serious that they go back in again within 3 years. That's part of the problem as well as the other issues that Emily mentioned with not having enough after-school and summer programs for our kids, and just needing to do a better job overall with our schools. So it's a multifaceted program, but we have to be disciplined and focused in addressing all parts of it if we want to deal with this over the long run, and that's what I hope to do if I'm elected.
Thank you. A reminder to anybody on the phone, you may ask the Lieutenant Governor a question simply by pressing 0 on your keypad. And next we have a question from Rita.
Yes, hello. I'm calling because I have a question, 2 questions actually. The selling of drugs is not about people that are victims of the drug use, but the big business. It's a big business. And the banks participated in money laundering to the point that the government finally said they had to set limits on $10,000 investments in the bank that did not come with some kind of explanation. So you're going to look at the source of some of the problem of creating a drug market in Delaware and Wilmington especially, rather than just always looking at those that are getting shot because they're part of that trade, the ones that are on the street. but the ones that are behind that drug trade? And how would you
Yeah,
define
I think that's
that?
a great question, and it's a great question. And if you go to our website, one of the things that it talks about is trying to prosecute enterprise crimes, and that's really, I think, what you're driving at as well. The drug selling in Delaware is a business, and it is what's driving a lot of the violence. And there are people who are further up the food chain, the folks who are actually profiting off of the street level activity, who too often are not being pursued and prosecuted. So one of the things that I would like the office to try to focus on is putting together cases against the folks who are further up the chain, who are employing a lot of the people who are causing a lot of the violence and disruption on the streets. And that's something that you actually can do, and that I think we should do out of the Attorney General's office, try to build some of these cases. Sometimes it involves using people who are arrested at the street level as witnesses to try to prosecute people who are, again, further up the chain. But I absolutely think that you're right, that if you continue to only prosecute and pursue people who are selling hand-to-hand at the street level, that you're not going to ultimately be able to address the problem as effectively as we would want.
Thank you. The result of our second poll question is that the people on the line think the most important aspect of preventing crime is expanding the availability of after-school and summer programming for youth. And a reminder to everybody on the call, if you would like to ask a question of the Lieutenant Governor, please press 0. Lieutenant Governor, would you like to weigh in on the answer of expanding the availability of after-school or summer programming for youth?
Yeah, some people think that things like after-school and summer programs are just nice ideas, or that they're sort of feel-good things, but that's not the case. There are actually pretty good studies that show statistically that young people and teenagers who participate in these after-school and summer programs get into trouble less often and actually do better in school and have fewer delinquency problems. So this is something that we do a little bit of in Delaware, but that we certainly could do a lot more of, and not only will it pay off on the criminal justice front, but these are kids who will also end up doing better in school and coming out as better adults in the long run.
All right. And our next caller is Dolores. Dolores, you have a question for the Lieutenant Governor, please?
Yes.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Linda, and my question is about cell phone usage and driving in Delaware. I'm really tired of watching police people in their squad cars on their cell phones. I'm tired of seeing people behind their wheels driving very unsafely on cell phones. Nobody's doing anything about it. I'm tired of it. It's dangerous. What can realistically be done? Thank you.
Well, it's always hard for our law enforcement officers who are out on the road. We're asking them to do so many different things at once that I'm always hesitant to second-guess the judgments that they make in terms of, how they prioritize dealing with traffic offenses versus dealing with the emergency calls that they have to respond to, or just doing
Can't
the
they just,
of...
excuse me, can't they just
Sure.
pull over like I do? I don't drive and talk on my cell phone. If it's an emergency, you pull over and take care of it. You don't multitask while driving. You just don't.
You're talking about police officers who are talking on cell phones?
Down 95.
Okay.
Yep.
I haven't seen that happening, and I would hope that I think there are some exceptions for emergency type situations that are built into the statute and the way that it's enforced. But absent that I would hope and expect that our law enforcement officers are following the rules of the road, just like everyone does. But again, they're sometimes dealing with with emergency circumstances that you or I might not even know about just seeing them drive by.
Okay. A reminder to callers on the phone, please just press 0 on your keypad to be connected to ask a question to the Lieutenant Governor. And I think we have Will next for a call. Will, are you there?
Yes, my name is Will. I was trying to find out what could be done as far as people with criminal backgrounds that have changed their life, that's trying to seek employment. What could we do more to actually allow them to actually have employment versus being denied for a job that they're obviously eligible for and they're qualified for, but because of something that per se is on their record from 10, 12 years ago that has nothing to do even with the job. They've changed their life and they're trying their best. What can we do to help them get employment?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of those cases, Will. One of the things that is part of your job as Lieutenant Governor is to chair the Board of Pardons, and every month we hear about 40 cases, and I would say that out of 40 cases every month that we hear, probably half of them involve people who are in the situation that you talk about, where they have some type of record where they just can't get past the paper part of an application for a job. The state passed a law last year for people who are applying for government jobs that is called a ban the box law that allows them to get past the paper cut part of the application and make sure that they at least get on to the next stage even if they have a criminal record. It allows the state to consider the criminal record, in the end before it hires someone, but it at least gets them past the paper cut part of it. And I think you see more and more of our private employers moving in that direction as well, and that's, I think, something that we want to encourage them to do as a government. I mean, there are some types of crimes where you want people to know what those crimes are because there are certain types of sensitive jobs where you don't want people who have committed certain crimes holding them. But to have it be an across-the-board type of rule where no one who's had any type of offense in the past able to even get a job interview, I don't think that that's a situation that anyone wants. And hopefully we're moving in that direction with bills like that ban the box bill that the state passed last year.
Great. Paul, thank you so much for your question. Will, thank you so much for your question. Next we have Paul. Paul, you have a question for the Lieutenant Governor?
Yes, my name is Paul, and I live in the city of Wilmington. And I have to preface my remarks by saying I have gone on your website and I've read your plan, and I have become a big Matt Dehn fan. My question, though, is I live in the city of Wilmington, and I don't understand why, since Wilmington is part of Newcastle County and part of the state of Delaware, why police departments can't be consolidated and resources put in high crime areas, even if that crime area is in the city of Wilmington. Is there anything the Attorney General's office can do to further that?
Well, I think that, in the short term, and I think that we have to deal with some of these problems, in a short-term way because people are getting shot. We just had someone shot in the city yesterday on East 26th Street. I think that trying to get the departments to work together under their current structure is the way to go. And I think that's very possible, that we have had the state and the county and the city police working together in limited and quiet ways in the city over the past couple of months. The departments all work well together, and I don't really see any reason why we couldn't expand those efforts and have the state police, the county police, probation and parole officers working alongside our city police department in a much more visible way, again, with an emphasis on being out of the cars and on foot patrols in some of these high crime areas. So I agree with you that that's the common sense approach to the problem. And I think that it's not only doable, but something that we can do in the very short term and that we ought to do. And the Attorney General is the most visible and really the most central law enforcement official in the state. So I think that the Attorney General, and that'll be me if I'm elected, really is in a position to try to make those things happen, to deal with the logistical challenges, deal with the financial challenges, and actually get those officers out on the street where we want them.
Great. Paul, thanks so much for your call. Dolores has a question. Dolores?
Yes, hello. This is a grandparent speaking to you, Governor. I am interested in a long stay rehabilitation instead of a short stay. In the paper the other day, there was an article saying you're opening a couple new facilities. They are short. An addict has to stay a couple of years. I've got a grandson that's one. He tried down in Florida. He's now in California. He could not get any place close to home, meaning Delaware, in a long stay. Hopefully I'm correct on this, and hopefully you can look into this and do something and have a long stay for these young 22-year-olds. Thank you.
Thank you, Dolores. I appreciate the fact that you're looking after your did you say it was a grandson? Grandson.
Yes.
And you're right that the new facility that is opening is a detox center. It's a very, very short-term facility that is really designed for the very acute, immediate cases, and that does not address the problem that you're talking about, which is that we do have some folks who are addicted, or it's going to take a long time to deal with their addiction. that is going to require us spending some money. I mean, there's no way of sugarcoating that. There are different types of addictions. There are different types of people, and we have to get people into the right program that is going to deal with their particular problem, deal with it immediately, not put them on a waiting list, deal with it here in Delaware so they can be close to family and not be shipped out to another state, and take the time that it takes to deal with it. The good news is that as I go around the state, that everybody sees this problem now. Sometimes you have problems where only a particular part of the state thinks it's a priority, and it's difficult to get enthusiasm from legislators to spend money on it. This has become a problem in every single part of our state, and I think that I'm going to have some success when I go to the legislature, and as I mentioned earlier, go to our hospitals, go to our insurance carriers and say, this is something that we need to invest in and make programs like the one that you're talking about available here in Delaware, so that people can take care of their loved ones close to home and not have to travel to get well.
Dolores, thank you so much for your call. A reminder to those who are listening on the line tonight, if you would like to ask Matt Dan a question, please just press 0 on your keypad. And we've had a couple of questions come in that are fairly similar, so instead of putting one person on the phone to ask the question, I'm just going to see if I can kind of put them all together here. Recidivism is a huge issue in Delaware, and people who have gotten out of trouble and gone into prison often return to the same troubled situations that they came out of. How do you think the Attorney General can play a role in stopping that cycle?
We have some good programs in Delaware right now that are having some success on a very small scale in helping some of our inmates who are released into the community not end up back inside again. They operate on a shoestring. They don't really require a lot of investment, and they're doing a good job. And so my first priority would be to try to do more of what works and to try to take these programs that are doing such a good job with these recently released inmates and be able to expand them and have more inmates be able to have the benefit of them. Also to try to do more work with some of our folks in prison while they're in prison. We don't need to wait until they're released in order to be able to help them. We should be trying to take advantage of the fact that they're a captive audience while they're incarcerated and try to get them ready to return to the working world. States that have really focused on this and that have been committed to it have seen their recidivism rates drop by 10 or 20%. So I don't see any reason to think that we couldn't have the same results here if we focus the same type of energy on it that other states have.
Thank you, Matt. I think a great follow-up question is one that Evelyn has. Evelyn, are you there, please?
Mr. Dan, I'm sorry, my voice. In the high crime areas, until the guns and the drugs get out, if it ever does, why don't y'all have a curfew for the children and the adults? It's not fair to the police to get shot up with all these criminals around, and nobody wants to squeal on them because they're afraid of them. I mean, there should be a curfew if the parents aren't going to keep the kids in the house and the adults want to go out and sell the drugs. It's just not fair to the police to have to, if there's a curfew and they're out on the street, I think the police have the right to stop them and check out if they have drugs and haul them off to jail. And there should be a curfew if all this dilemma is happening.
Well, a curfew is something that we can certainly look at, and some states have done it on and off, and even Delaware from time to time has had one on and off. My concern is that if we do that and we don't do some of the other things that I've mentioned, that the drug traffic and the violence will just adjust, number one, just adjust to it, and number two, the people who are violating the law just are going to violate the curfew as well. So I think it's certainly one of the tools that we can look at, but if we don't have the law enforcement officers out there to actually enforce the law, whether it's the curfew or any of the existing drug or gun laws, if we don't have the priority set for those gun crimes, if we're not making sure that these violent individuals, when we do pick them up, don't end up back out on the street again, then I don't know that having a curfew is going to add a lot. So I think it's certainly one of the options that we can look at, but I don't think that we can look at it as a substitute for the other things that we've been talking about.
Lieutenant Governor, thank you. Next up is Jean. Jean, do you have a question for Matt Dent?
Yes, I do. You're hearing a lot about what the police should do, what is causing the crime rate and the gun violence. I personally see it that there's too many people that are out on the streets. There's not employment. I see them hanging out during the day. And unfortunately, I'm not defending them, but some of them don't know better, and that's the only way they can support their families. Unfortunately, it's not the correct way. Do you think unemployment plays a big factor?
Sure, it's certainly a factor. I mean, it's not an excuse, but I think it's anyone who's realistic about how they look at these things recognizes that the more people that you have who are out of work, the more they're going to be tempted by the opportunity to do things that are illegal in order to pay their bills. So, again, being unemployed or having a high unemployment rate isn't an excuse for doing these things. But if we want to be comprehensive about how we're dealing with the problem, then trying to get as many people working as we can has to be a priority. And as Lieutenant Governor, I mean, it's a tough environment out there to create jobs, and I don't think that I'm telling anybody on the phone anything that they don't know. It's something that we've really been focused on as a state government over the last 6 years. And if you pay attention to the numbers, our unemployment rate has been getting better and better, slowly but surely, over the last few years. But we were digging ourselves out of such a hole from the recession that we went through in 2008 and 2009 that we're really just now only kind of getting back to where we were 6 years ago. That doesn't make us different from the rest of the country. The rest of the country is having the same problem, but it's been a slow recovery. We're going to keep at it. But I think that your underlying point is right, that the better we do getting people back to work, the better off we're going to be in terms of people not being tempted to do things like selling drugs.
Jean, thank you for your call. Next is Carol. Carol, go ahead, please.
My question is about when the juveniles on the street. When you have a young person who has violated probation repeatedly, has had dirty urines, and they go into and the police have done their job, and they go into the court system, and the judge releases them back home repeatedly when the mother or parents say, we can't handle this kid, and he doesn't go to school. What can we do about that? Because that is actually adding to the crime on the street because, as you know, it's younger and younger kids who are shooting each other on the streets.
Yeah, I think that's a real issue that you bring up. I mean, there's two parts to it. What I hear a lot from law enforcement officers is about people who are picked up, whether they're juveniles or adults, but it includes juveniles, who they arrest for pretty serious crimes, who they then see back out on the street again a day or two later while their trial's coming up. And trials can, in many cases, take months to occur. And that's something that we're going to have to address with our courts because we can't have that. If there are people who are dangerous, who are contributing to the chaos that's going on in some of our neighborhoods, and they're actually arrested for one of these crimes, if it's a violent one or a serious one, we have to have a polite but serious conversation with our courts about why that is happening and stopping it from happening. And we also need to look inwards, if I'm elected Attorney General, at the type of bail that we're requesting for people and making sure that we're requesting appropriately high levels of bail for some of these violent cases. The other instance that you talk about is really the flip side of that. If we have people who are on probation who have essentially been given a second or a third chance and they keep violating probation over and over and over again, we do have to be sure and have to be disciplined about making sure that eventually we don't take it anymore and that they have to do some time. You don't like to have to go that route because generally people who are on probation either have already done time or have committed crimes that are of a low enough level that a judge thought probation was enough, but they have to comply with their probation, and if they repeatedly violate it, then there have to be consequences for that.
All right, and we have kind of a follow-up question on that from Audrey. Audrey, go ahead, please.
Lieutenant General, this is Audrey, and I'm calling. So I've only heard part of your response. I don't know what the question was to the previous one. But I guess my question is, I realize that we need to start with our youth in order to try to prevent the crime that we have now. And I wanted to know what is available for use once they commit crimes. As you said, there's a certain amount of time when they're arraigned and then before they go back to trial. If they're being let off a little bit too leniently by our judges, and how we can enforce these things a little bit better, and what programs could be available in the schools to educate these young individuals about the consequences that they're going to pay if they commit crimes.
I think that addressing these issues with young people when they're young is critical, and part of it is prevention. And the last part of your question, I think, relates to what are we doing with these young people during the school day, and maybe more importantly, what are we doing with them after school and during the summertime? A lot of these young people are going home to homes where there's no one there to supervise them. In many cases, it's a single-parent household, or maybe even a two-parent household where both parents have to work all day, and they're not supervised at home, and those are often the kids who are getting into trouble. And if we are able to have some programs after school in the summertime where they can, A, stay out of trouble, and B, actually be doing something that's helpful to them in terms of succeeding in school, that's a great outcome. And we do a little bit of that now, but not nearly enough as we should. And we mentioned a little bit earlier that there are some real tangible results from doing that. We've seen statistically in other states that kids who are in these programs get into trouble much less and are prosecuted as juvenile delinquents much less. If they have done something that they shouldn't, then they, in some cases, in the most serious cases, they actually get dealt with as adults and get prosecuted in adult court, usually superior court. Those in-between cases can be challenging because you are dealing with young people. Sometimes it's their first offense, sometimes they're very young. But if they are serious and violent crimes, serious or violent crimes, then they have to be treated as such. And even if they're being treated as a juvenile and it's a delinquency case rather than a criminal case, young people are smart, and word gets around about how they're going to be treated if they do something they shouldn't. So there has to be an understanding among teenagers as well that there are serious consequences if they commit serious crimes, and particularly if they hurt someone.
And we've gotten a couple of questions from people as a follow-up to our first poll question about what should be done to reduce violent crime in Delaware. And a few people have asked for you to expand on two of the answers, which were creating connections between the Attorney General's office and the community and bolstering grassroots organizations in high crime areas. Could you talk a little bit about both of those?
Sure. One of the really important things about having a visible police presence in some of our communities with high crime rates is that 99% plus of the people who live in these neighborhoods are law-abiding citizens who want to have safe neighborhoods, who appreciate having the police there. And if you can have real relationships of trust between the police and that 99% who are living there, number one, it helps you prevent crime because the residents will feel comfortable letting the police know before things happen. And number two, if a crime does occur, it will make residents much more likely to cooperate with police in helping to solve some of these crimes. Our rate of solving some of the violent crimes that are happening in our state is disturbingly low. And if we have a real relationship of trust between the neighbors and some of the neighborhood organizations that we have in some of our high crime areas, we're going to do a lot better preventing and also solving crime.
Okay, thank you, Matt. We have reached the end of the time for tonight's call. We're going to ask the Lieutenant Governor for his final thoughts, but if you have a question that we did not get to, you'll still get a chance to submit it at the end of this call. Lieutenant Governor?
Well, I just appreciate everyone participating tonight. Our website, if you want to get more information about some of my plans, is www.mattden.com. It talks about my plans to deal with violent crime in our state and also a lot of other issues that we just didn't have time to address tonight. So I'm hoping that this Tuesday I'll get the chance to serve you as your Attorney General, and that we'll be able to make some real positive changes in our state and make the state a safer place for all of our families. Thank you for participating tonight.
Thank you to everybody on the call for joining us tonight. Unfortunately, we couldn't get to every question. If you have additional questions, please stay on the line, and you will be able to leave a voicemail at the end of the event that will be shared with the Lieutenant Governor. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great night, and please remember to get out and vote on Tuesday. Thank you.